Hey everyone, Gilberto from Snowflake here. So Snowflake has this brand new command line interface called Snowflake CLI. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use it to do all sorts of things. Now, yes, you can execute SQL directly from the command line using Snowflake CLI, but this CLI does way more than just that. You can use it to create Snowpark projects. You can use it to deploy applications directly into your account. You can even use it to manage Snowpark Container Services all from the command line. So let me show you how to do a few of these things. All right, so the first thing that you need to do is install the Snowflake CLI, which you can do with pip. You can also install it using pipx, and you can learn about how and why to use pipx in the quick start that's in the description. But I'm using pip in my local environment, so I'm going to install it using pip install snowflake-cli-labs. And you'll see here that the requirement is already satisfied, and that's because I already have it installed. Now, if you do have it installed and you simply want to upgrade to the next version, you can run pip install -- upgrade snowflake-cli-labs. Okay, same message here. So to verify that it's been successfully installed, you can run snow -- help just as a quick sanity check. And if everything was installed correctly, you should see output that looks like this. Okay, let's start connecting to Snowflake. Okay, so now that you have the CLI installed, let's go ahead and configure a connection to Snowflake. When you first install the CLI, a config.toml file is going to be created for you. And this is a file that you'll use to manage connections to Snowflake. Now you can add a connection in a couple of different ways. So if you type in snow connection add and run this command, this is going to kick off some prompts in the terminal that you can use to quickly add your connection details. I'm going to go ahead and suspend this, and that's because I prefer to edit the file directly. So instead of configuring my connection here, I'm going to open the file in VS Code. If you type in snow -- info, you should see some output that contains the path to the config toml file. I'll hold down command and click on this, and this will open up the file. And here you can see that I have a couple of different connections configured, and this is super handy if you have more than one Snowflake environment. Now, within your connection details, you're going to specify things like the account identifier, the user, a password, and any other relevant Snowflake context you want to make sure you have set for your connection. You can also set a default connection by writing default_connection_name equals the name of your connection. So if I wanted this trial connection to be my default connection, I could set this to trial. But I'm actually going to configure my default connection directly from the terminal. And so what I'll do is I'll type snow connection set default and then the name of my connection. So I'll go ahead and type in trial because I want the trial connection to be my default connection. All right, so now this is going to be the default connection that is going to be used whenever you don't specify a connection name when you're using other commands in the CLI. So now that that's been set, we can test the connection and make sure that everything has been successfully configured. So I'll type in snow connection test -- connection and pass in the name of the connection. So I'm going to make sure that trial has been successfully configured. And if everything goes well, you should see output like this. So you'll see information around the connection name, the account, the user, and anything else you might have specified in the connection. Okay, great. So now that this connection has been configured, let's start doing things with the CLI. You can also create and manage objects directly from the CLI too. So for example, let's go ahead and create a new database by typing in snow SQL-q, and -q is just a shorthand for -- query. I'm going to type in create database snowflake_CLI_DB. I'll go ahead and run that. And if you navigate back to your Snowflake account, you should now see this new database created. So I'll come over here and just refresh. And you can see that the database has indeed been created. So let's now navigate back to the terminal and we'll look at a couple of commands that you can use to learn more about objects in your account. So I'm going to start with the snow object list command, and we'll use it to look at databases in the account that I'm connecting to. So go ahead and type in snow object list database. And this command is going to show you the databases that are available to the role that you specified in your connection. And another neat command that you can run is snow object describe. And snow object describe is going to provide more information about In this case, a specific database that you specify in the command, like this, snow object describe database. And I know that I have a database in my account called util_db. And so here are the details behind that database. So I can see that it has two schemas. And here I'm demonstrating how to use the snow object command specifically for database objects, but you can also run this command for other objects as well, like schemas, for example. Okay, so there's quite a bit that you can do with SQL and Snowflake objects using the CLI, but the CLI's capabilities go way beyond that. For example, let me show you how to deploy Streamlit and Snowflake apps directly from the Snowflake CLI. Now you'll notice that I'm in the config.toml file, and the reason for this is because my default connection, connections.trial, already has some context specified, specifically the warehouse, database, and the schema. And this is the context that will be used when I attempt to deploy my Streamlit and Snowflake app. Now, I don't want the Streamlit and Snowflake app to live inside of this database. I want it to live in another separate database that I'm going to create. But rather than modify my connections.trial connection here, I just went ahead and created a new connection, connections.trial_app, where you can see that I don't specify the context, and that's intentional. And this will give me more flexibility to be able to create any objects that I want to be able to deploy my Streamlit and Snowflake app. So this is a connection that I'll use, trial_app, to deploy my Streamlit and Snowflake app. And keep in mind, this is the same account. I'm just not setting the context. All right, so to initialize a Streamlit and Snowflake project, you can run the snow streamlit init command, and you'll need to pass in the name of your project. So I'll go ahead and type in streamlit_app. And you'll see that this has created a new project for me. And here's a folder that contains the files for my application. So the next thing you'll want to do is navigate to the folder that we just created. And we're going to need to do two things before deploying the app. First, create a database for the app to live in. And second, specify the warehouse to use to run and deploy the app. So to create a database, we'll go ahead and use snow SQL-Q. Again, this is the shorthand for running a query. And we're going to go ahead and create our database. So create database Streamlit example. I'll go ahead and execute that. All right. The next thing that we'll need to do is specify the virtual warehouse before we can deploy the Streamlit application. So the way that we'll do this is we'll navigate over here to the snowflake.yaml file that's in this folder. And here in the query warehouse field, we'll type in the name of the virtual warehouse that we want to use. We want to go ahead and use compute_warehouse. I'll go ahead and save this file. And then finally, we'll deploy the app by running snow streamlit deploy --database. Again, this is where we want the application to live. This is going to be the database that we just created. So streamlit_example. Now, if I run this now, this is going to attempt to deploy the application in my default connection in that database, but I can't write to that database because that's a data share. So again, we're going to specify connection trial_app. I'll go ahead and hit enter and run that. And so if everything is successful, you should see output like this. And what I love about this is that you get a link to the application directly in the terminal. So if you click on that, this will open up a new tab for you. And you can see that the application is booting up. And the application is now running. Now, this is just a very basic Streamlit and Snowflake app. And the purpose is just to show you that if you have your Streamlit project here, you can deploy it using the CLI. And if you want to browse the code for this sample app, you can do so by navigating to the code that's inside this Streamlit_app folder that we created. And it's not just Streamlit and Snowflake apps that you can deploy. You can also use the Snowflake CLI for deploying Snowflake native applications. Now, this is especially handy if you're developing a Snowflake native application and you want to quickly install it in your Snowflake account and test it out. So let's go ahead and run through the flow together. You can start by typing snow app init and then type in the name of your project. So I'll type in my_native_app and then type in --template space streamlit-python. All right, so Snow app refers specifically to Snowflake native applications, and here we ran init, which created a project for us called my native app. Now, what's this dash dash template flag? So this is going to instruct the CLI to create the native app based on a predetermined template that Snowflake has provided called streamlit-python. And you can check out the quick start for more details on the template. The next thing that we'll do is we will navigate to the folder that we just created. And in here, you'll see a few different things. You'll see a snowflake.yaml file, and this is a project definition file that includes all sorts of info about the Snowflake native app that you're going to build. There's a source directory, and this contains all the source code for the stored procedures, UDFs, and the Streamlit application. There's an app directory, and this contains the files that are required by the Snowflake native app framework, like the manifest YAML file and a setup script. And then last but not least, there's a scripts folder that contains all the scripts that are going to be run as part of the creating of the Snowflake native app. All right, so let's go ahead and deploy the Snowflake native app into our Snowflake account. And we're going to do this by typing snow app run. And again, we want to use the connection that we defined earlier, trial_app. We'll go ahead and run that. And just a quick note here as it's deploying, this template is going to assume that the role in the warehouse that you specified in your config toml file has all the privileges to create an application package and an application object. So if you didn't specify either of those in the config toml file, then the default role and or the default warehouse assigned to your user are what's going to be used. Okay, so if you were successful in deploying the application, you should see an output like this. And again, I love that there's a direct link here to the application that's been installed directly in my account. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the link so that I can go to the application. Okay, so you can see that I'm in my Snowflake account. The native app is booting up. And there it is. It's now running in my account. And this is a very simple native application that has a UI that allows me to invoke a UDF or a stored procedure. And so this UDF just simply adds a couple of numbers here and returns the output. Okay, great. And if you quickly navigate back to the app section within data products, you can see that the installed app is indeed the my native app, G Hernandez native app that I just deployed. Okay, so let's go back to the terminal. I want to show you a couple of other cool things. So one really neat thing about native apps via the Snowflake CLI is that you can run the logic behind that's powering, say, a user-defined function directly from the terminal. So let's take a look at how we would do that. If I go ahead and type in snow SQL-Q, and here I'm going to write this SQL that is going to invoke the add UDF function that is part of my Snowflake native application. And again, this function takes in two numbers and returns a sum. I can actually invoke the UDF directly from the CLI and just test out whether or not it works correctly. And if I just specify which connection to use and I go ahead and run that, you'll see that the CLI successfully called the UDF, and then I get the results of the UDF adding the number 1 and 2 together, and I get the result of 3. That's pretty cool. There are a couple of more handy commands. If you already have deployed your Snowflake native app and you simply want to go back and open it, you could type in snow app open, and then again, just specify whatever connection you're using. Could be your default connection, or in this case, I could use trial app. I'm not going to do this because you've already seen the application in my Snowflake account. But another super handy command is snow app teardown, and all this is going to do is drop the application package and the application from my Snowflake account. So I'll go ahead and specify my connection again. And then you'll see some output here in the terminal saying, hey, the application has been dropped and the application package has also been dropped. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is one of my favorite things that you can do directly from the command line, and that is manage Snowpark Container Services using Snowflake CLI. So here's the overview of what we're going to do. I'm going to run an Nginx web server directly in my Snowflake environment using Snowpark Container Services. And the way that I'm going to do this is by creating a service, specifying to that service a path to the container image that represents the web server. And then we'll run all of that in a compute pool that we'll create. And again, I'm going to do this all with Snowpark Container Services using Snowflake CLI. Now, before I get started, just a quick note. I will be using a new connection in my config toml file that points to a new Snowflake environment. And the reason for that is because this new environment is enabled for Snowpark Container Services, which means I'll be able to run this demo. So just a quick heads up, if you want to try this demo on your own, you will need a Snowflake account that is enabled for Snowpark Container Services. All right, so I'll start by using the command line just to do a little bit of account setup. And so you'll see here that I have a couple of SQL files. One is called admin setup SQL and the other is called user setup SQL. And what these files do is basically set up my Snowflake environment with some account level objects. So here in my admin setup.sql file, you can see I'm creating a role that I'll use for the demo. I create a few objects like a database or virtual warehouse, a security integration, and the compute pool that we'll use to run the service on top of. Then I just grant that role to my user, G. Hernandez. I've actually, just for the purposes of convenience here, I've already run this command. And so that's already executed in the way that I ran that command using snowsql/f, specify the path to the file, and then I was using my connection here to my new Snowflake environment. The next thing that I'll do is run the user setup SQL script. And the way that I'll do this is, again, snowsql/f, path to the file. And I'll go ahead and run that. All this file is doing is using that role and also setting my context for the rest of the demo. All right, so you can imagine, for example, that an account admin did the steps that are in the admin setup SQL file, and then just for the purposes of the demo, I'm using the test role to actually do the demo. All right, so you saw some of the successes messages here whenever I ran the user setup.sql file. So with that now set up, let's go ahead and run a couple of commands. So the first thing that we'll do is, if we want to take a look at more details on the compute pool that we created, we can type in snow object describe compute pool and then the name of the compute pool that we created. So I'm typing this in here. And this will give you some information around the compute pool that was created just now, who created it, the instance family, when it was created, that type of thing. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to grab the URL to the image repository. And I'll do this by typing in Snow's SPCS, which is short for Snowpark Container Services, image repository URL for the tutorial repository. If I run that, this will take a few seconds to run, but essentially is going to point to the URL of the image repository within my Snowflake environment. This is where the container image that will run in our compute pool in Snowpark Container Services, this is where it's going to be. I'm going to now change into the tutorial folder, which is where I have a lot of the other code for this demo. And the next thing that I'll do is to create our service. And I'll use the following command to actually create the service. Now, this is quite a long command here, which is why I'm copying it into the terminal. You can find this command in the corresponding step of the quick start that's linked in the description to this video. I'm saying here is use Snowflake CLI to create a service called Echo Service, specify the compute pool that we're going to run the service on top of, specify the number of instances for the service, and a path to the spec YAML file, which contains the service definition. So I'll go ahead and run that. All right, and you can see here the service has been successfully created. And so with that created, let's just quickly take a look at a couple of commands just to help us get the status of the service. So if I type in snow spcs service status echo service, should get a little bit of output here. You can see here it's ready, it's running. The container name is called Echo. You can see where the image is currently living. So again, in that image repository, in my Snowflake account, and specifying here exactly the image that we're going to use. If you want to get even more detailed information on the service, you can say snow object describe, which remember we used this earlier, but now you can use it on the service. So you can say service echo service. And that's cool. You get more information around the service. And here you would expand your terminal just so you can see all the things that you get from the command. But it's just want to show the command there so you can see that you can get more information about the service. But we actually want to use the service, so we will actually want to see the Nginx web server running in Snowflake. And so to do that, we'll need to grab the endpoint that points to the service. So this is the endpoint that we can use in the browser to actually access the service that we're running. So we're going to type in snow spcs service, list endpoints of the echo service. So I'll go ahead and run that. Just give it a second here. So you'll see here, you'll get a message, endpoints provisioning in progress, check back in a few minutes. So it might take 1 to 2 minutes to actually provision a URL for you so that you can access the service in the browser. So just give it a few seconds. So I'll go ahead and run this again and see if my endpoint has been provisioned. And so if I run it now, I'll see that I have indeed a URL that points to the service that I've created. Again, we're trying to run an Nginx web server inside of a Snowpark container, which I could access with this URL. And so I'll go ahead and copy this to the clipboard. All right, so I'll go ahead and navigate to the browser. I will paste this URL in. It is going to ask me to log in, which is totally fine. I already have this saved, so I'll go ahead and autofill this in. It's the same credentials for my connection. Now you can see I have an error here, and that's intentional. And that's because I've defined /UI as the route that's going to serve the UI. So if I just append UI to the URL, we will have something that renders here. And the reason for that is if you navigate back to the tutorial folder and you navigate to the echo service py file, you'll see if you scroll down on line 71, you'll find the route definition. You'll see that there is a route called /UI, and this is going to be the handler for providing a web UI to the Nginx web server. So if I go back, and this time I'll append /UI, I should now see something. So you can see my very basic front end here for my service that I'm running. Right, it just says welcome to Echo Service, and if I just type in something into this input box like hello world and hit enter, right, you get a repeat of the input and also a slight modification of the input in the output where we say I said, and then we just pass in that string. Okay, great. So here I am. I'm running an Nginx web server in my Snowflake account using Snowpark Container Services. And you can see that it's running in my Snowflake account because I have that URL that points to my environment. So you can look at the URLs and look at the service actually running in Snowflake. And we did all this from the command line using Snowpark Container Services. That was pretty neat. All right, so if you followed along, you should clean up your Snowflake environment by following the cleanup steps and the corresponding step of the quick start, which again is linked to in the description. So with that, thanks again for watching. I had a blast showing you all the different things that you can do with the Snowflake CLI, but I only showed a sample of what's possible. So I encourage you to check out the documentation and check out all the cool things that Snowflake CLI supports and see how you can fit it into your workflow. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.